things we do outside of work. So most important for me, I'm a dad and a husband. I have 2 boys, one of them in college, who's actually providing me kind of the ultimate coaching gig at the moment, as I help them through some difficult times with it. But that's the most important thing to me. Focusing on developing great people and teams. Ultimately, that's what this next hour and a half is going to be about. It is the people and the teams. I love teaching, coaching, mentoring, speaking. As I've said, I've been in IT for about 25 years now, and doing the project management gig for about 10. I'm starting to move away from that over the last 3 years, which has a lot to do with having discovered Lean and Agile. Not that it's some great big revelation that a lot of other people haven't discovered, but I'm finding that there's a better way than what PMI says we should be doing. Some hobbies I have. I'm a drummer with a police band back in Kitchener-Waterloo. We're the only band of our style left in North America. And medical venture, so a first aiding organization. So I have a lot of things that keep me busy, most of which being the family part of this. Kitchener, in case you don't know, we're about 100 kilometers southwest of Toronto, down towards London and Windsor. It's actually home to the 2nd biggest Oktoberfest in the world, Munich being the first one. And we just had that recently a few weeks ago. So that's me, that's where I'm from. What I want to talk about in the next 90 minutes here is one of the things that I believe really defines the work we do. What is the difference between so-so and really great results? And that's people. So going back to Joanna's keynote, I really loved her keynote because she spent a lot of time talking about the people and the culture. How many people liked her keynote this morning? Yeah. I thought she did a great job. No surprise coming from Joanna. But she spent a lot of time talking about those. What I want to do is go a little bit further. I see a lot of organizations and hear of a lot of organizations that are trying to do Agile as opposed to being Agile. And I think it leads to failure in a lot of cases. Admittedly, at Home Hardware, and it's one of the things that's driving me to go elsewhere and carve a different path for myself. Admittedly, our Agile transformation has not been overly successful because management is trying to do Agile. They're trying to get all the processes down. They're trying to have all this documentation. So, given I haven't been able to cross that boundary with them, and they've reverted back to some old practices, that's why I'm looking at doing something different. So I want to spend the next 90 minutes doing really 4 small presentations. This is going to be very interactive. I'm going to be looking for your feedback as we go. You're going to have things to do as we go through this, not the least of which has to do with the jar full of sugar. Okay? And at the end of it, we'll actually, whoever had the closest, and if there's multiple, we'll do it by draw from a hat. You can take the jar of jelly beans with you. And if you're curious, I sterilized the jar and I used medical gloves when I was handling the jelly beans. So they should be clean. Okay? I won't be offended though if you go, ooh, no thanks. Not a problem. They actually might be good at a presentation after lunch. I don't know if you were here last year, but Linda Rising was talking about that's the worst time to present because everybody's got a full stomach and you're getting that afternoon, you know, you need a siesta kind of thing. So it might be good to wake up the audience in whatever presentation you're in. So the 4 things we're going to talk about is attention, change, memory, and confidence. We're going to go through these one at a time. They tie to each other. And it's something I started researching about a year ago and how it ties to IT. What I won't be doing is talking about the science behind these things. One of the leading researchers in this field is a gentleman by the name of Daniel Simons. He's at Harvard, University of Illinois. And he very explicitly says he does not want you using his material directly out there in the industry because you can't explain the science properly. I subscribe to that. Okay, so I'm not going to be talking about the science as part of this presentation. One of the things that I find quite frequently is people want to know what causes these things. And there's a whole list of things that can trigger these things to happen. Caffeine. Who was at this conference last year? Okay. Did anybody see Linda Rising's presentation last year of those people? Yeah. Linda talked about a number of different things, but one of the big things she's talked about was caffeine, the effects it has on us. How many people have caffeine every day? How many have lots of caffeine every day? Yeah, I've cut back since I saw Linda's presentation. But in her presentation, was from an actual study, and I always saw this and I never really believed it. And after listening to Linda, I went and read more about it. But there actually was a study where they injected spiders. You know, a spider who's on no kind of chemical at all is going to make a normal-looking spider web. Then you have one who's on marijuana. And I won't pretend to do this like Linda did last year. She did it wonderfully how she explained this. But she was talking about how, you know, a spider that's on marijuana, you know, he starts out and, you know what, I'm getting kind of tired of this. And so he doesn't quite finish it, but, you know, it still looks like a spider web, right? Then you get the spider that's on benzodrine, which is running around because he's all high and he's, you know, doing it really fast, and it's still mostly there. Then we have caffeine, right? And caffeine and its effect on us. How does spider do this where it doesn't even look like a web? It just looks like a big mess, right? So when I saw this, I cut down my caffeine consumption. Other things that influence us: alcohol, going out at lunch, having a beer with lunch, or whatever the case. It can affect us. Multitasking. How many people believe multitasking is possible and effective?
These are two different things, possible or effective.
Let's go with possible. How many think it's possible? How many think it's effective? You know what, I used to think that too about myself. And you know, probably the biggest evidence that I've gone away from that belief is Thursday I'm teaching a tutorial on Canva, which is all about cutting back on the amount of tasks we have on the go at a single time. As humans, we actually cannot multitask. Now, I can't find the origins of this word. It appears to be back sometime in the 60s with computing. Right? We developed these computers which are totally capable of running two tasks at the exact same time. We as humans task switch. So if you were doing what we think of as multitasking, we actually have to put one down, turn off that part of our brain, pick up the other task and turn something else on. So we actually cannot multitask. We cannot do two at a given point in time. Fatigue and overtime. Lots of debate as to whether or not overtime is a good idea. People that think, you know what, I work well under that kind of pressure. Okay. Everybody has their own balance. Stress, our health, whether it's mental or physical. Too often we ignore the mental health. A lot of companies in their benefit program have some kind of help for the mental health. I don't think enough people make use of it. Our interest in our work, right? Do we even care about what we're doing? And if you don't, maybe it's time to find something different. Our happiness at work. Do we enjoy getting up out of bed and going to work every day? Our happiness in life, is it fulfilling? No, everything emotional. Personal responsibility. Are we there out of some kind of obligation? I don't know how many people might follow Christopher Avery, but he talks about obligation as being a bad place to be. If you're there because, well, I got to pay my bills and I need the money and I really have no choice and the money's not too bad, you're there because you're obligated to be there. And what he says is, if you're in that mode, you're going to quit. You're going to shut down. Doesn't mean you're going to walk out the door necessarily, but you're not going to be as good as you could be. And so much more. We as human beings are very complex creatures. So let's get into our first exercise here. If you've seen this or something similar, please just sit quietly about it. But I'm going to run this video. It's about a 45-second video. And it's really quite a simple task here. What I want you to do is count the number of passes the team in black makes. So they're going to take, they both have basketballs there. I just want you to focus on the number of passes. And there's a really interesting effect that comes from this. The other part of it is, and this is kind of neat, is there's a gender difference as well. There's a difference between how many passes males versus females will count. Okay, so I'm just going to run the video here. So just count the number of passes the guys in black make. And I got another video later too. There's no sound. The sound's really not important anyway. I don't have the means to amplify it, so. Let's see if the video, oh, there we go. Okay, so how many did you get? 19. Good. Any other? Sorry? 20. Any other counts?
25.
Did anybody see anything unusual? Watch it again. And this time as you're watching it, don't count. Just watch a video. Take in what's happening. Who saw the stormtrooper the first time around? Wow, good. The averages on this say that about half the people will see the unexpected, see the stormtrooper in this case. There's another famous video that Daniel Simon has that he produced that has a gorilla walking through the video. And it's the exact same kind of thing. I choose not to use his because of his request not to use it. It's copyrighted. He wants to be able to explain the science. Okay, so I've used a different video, same effect. What's going on here is an effect called inattentional blindness. There's a number of other names that go with this. Really what it comes down to is our inability to notice the unexpected. Now, if you're wondering, did I see the gorilla the first time I watched that video? No. And it was a YouTube clip out of a TED Talk. Probably many people have seen it. And the guy ran it twice. And I'm like, well, that gorilla could not possibly have been there the first time. So I had to rewind the YouTube video and watch it again. Right? I couldn't believe it. I've shown this to an advanced care paramedic in Ontario who's with our medical venture group, and he was beside himself. He teaches new paramedics and teaches them to watch for the unexpected. And here he missed a gorilla. He was quite upset at himself. He now uses this in his training. So it's really a neat effect that goes on here. What it comes down to is we as humans do not have the ability to actually see everything and notice everything that we look at. We have a very complex world, which makes you question, how did this guy survive when he was chased by this guy? Think about the world, the Neanderthals or the cavemen or whatever you want to think of them as. Think of the world they had 2,000, 5,000, however many thousands of years ago. They had a very simple world. Where you look at the world we have today, even if we were to walk out to Robson Street here, we have cars coming at us, we have people walking, there's signage, we have people walking along with their Blackberries. Is it illegal to hold an electronic device while driving?
Yes.
In BC?
Yes.
It is, okay. Yeah, Ontario just passed that law. I celebrate that law. I think it's a great thing. Unfortunately, of course, you still see lots of people doing this while they're driving along. And they actually think they have the ability to do that. What they're doing is creating a situation where inattentional blindness will get. So every day we take in a lot of visual messages. So I'm talking about all the things we see and do. It's the inability to notice the unexpected. Right? I was texting, I was driving, I was keeping the car between the lines. I didn't expect to see that pedestrian walk out in front of me. Our mind prioritizes and filters out the things we don't care about. Not necessarily that we don't care about it, it's just not the highest priority right now. Simple distractions can cause this blindness. And it goes back to the very first slide there, or one of the first slides when I talk about the different things that can influence us. Distractions come from many different ways. So is this for real? So in each one of these sections here, I'm going to talk about a few examples, and then we're going to switch to, okay, how does this impact IT? So I put a bicycle up here because back about 10 years ago, I was actually biking to work. Wouldn't know it now. But I was biking to work every day, and I came up to a corner, and this is a true story, and I stopped at the corner, and I looked at the car that was sitting there waiting to turn right. And I looked at the driver, and I'd swear she looked at me. I thought, okay, she saw me. She then proceeded to start her right-hand turn while looking left as I came out in front of her. Probably what she was looking for when I thought she was looking at me was cars coming down the street. What ended up happening is she hit my bike as I hopped off. I picked it up, went over to the corner, thinking she would stop and make sure I'm okay. No, she just took off. Luckily, I was okay. Right? So simple things like that. You see lots of examples of this. There's a police officer in Boston who was chasing somebody he thought was the bad guy, who had just committed a murder. And he ran right past another person who was being beaten to death. Now, luckily, the guy who was on the ground being beaten actually did not die. However, this guy was being beaten. In later testimony, this officer here was actually put in jail for having not dealt with that problem he ran by. He claims he never saw it. In intentional blindness, perhaps he was focused on the guy he was chasing. Everybody saw him look, he didn't take in what was going on. By the way, he is actually back in Boston PD. He worked with Daniel Simons and actually proved that this is possible. He missed it. They actually ran experiments. He's now back in Boston PD. The other one is a motorcycle. Motorcycles get hit. You hear the statement, I didn't see him. You know what? That's totally possible. In inattentional blindness, what we as drivers are doing when we look up the road is we're looking for the expected. We're looking for a truck or a car or something with two headlights. And along comes a motorcycle with one headlight. We don't expect to see them. That's why you actually see a lot of motorcycles, the newer ones now, are coming out with two headlights. Right? It's to start to create the illusion of a car coming. And then finally, my last example here is the flight Eastern 401. It was a flight that crashed near Miami in the Everglades. When they were on approach, they put their gear down. Oh, and sorry, the other part of this, the crew was extremely experienced. The captain was number 50 in their crew list, right? So extremely experienced. They put the gear down, and the one light did not come on that indicated the nose gear was down. So 3 lights come on for each of the gear, sets of gear. The nose gear light didn't come on. They went in, or left the area and went out over the Everglades into a holding pattern in order to try to figure out what was going on, because obviously they need to know whether or not that gear is down. As they're flying in this circle, what they didn't notice was the captain's knee hit some button or switch or trigger or something that actually disengaged a part of the autopilot that keeps them flying at a level altitude. So they actually started a very slow descent. And the crew continued to focus on that light bulb. They even sent somebody down below into the hole. They had another crew member on board who could do this, to look through a little hole where the landing gear is in order to see whether or not the landing gear was extended. In the end, what happened was they drifted down so far by the time they decided to do something different. The first officer grabbed a stick, and when he went to turn, they dug in the one end of their one wing, their left wing. Now, 100 people died in this example. But I think it shows the degree of how extreme this can be. What was actually wrong? The light bulb was burnt out. But they were so focused on that one thing, they missed everything else. There's actually documentation that says the ground proximity warning started going off. And it's a big looping sound, and there's a voice that comes on loud and clear and says, terrain, pull up. terrain pull up. And apparently in the cockpit voice recorder, there's no indication that the crew heard that.
Oh, jeez.
So inattentional blindness extends beyond what we see. So some examples of where this happens. So does this apply to IT? Absolutely. I mean, ultimately, I wouldn't be standing up here if I didn't think it applied. Anybody have code that looks like this? We do, right? Very complex, lots of moving pieces, right? Lots of things. And I thought of how can I explain this to the group? And I found this Volvo picture. And in case anybody's never done a Finding Volvo, the whole idea is to find a guy who's wearing a red and white striped shirt and hat. Right? There's a specific guy by the name of Volvo in this picture here. And I took this picture and I started a timer. I'd never seen this particular drawing before. And I went for 15 minutes. And I sat here and I scoured it. And I was even doing stuff like this and trying to find him. I could not find him. So then what I did is I took some paper and I created a box for myself. And I started moving that box around the piece of paper here. And limiting the amount of what I was looking at. Should have set that timer a little bit shorter here. See if I can push it along. There we go. And as soon as I put the piece of paper down on that last spot there, boom, I saw him right away. Right? Because I was limiting what I was seeing. He's right there, plain as day. I could not see him prior to going through that exercise. So when we think about what we do in IT, oftentimes we'll look at things in some huge macro way. We need to limit that. We need to bring it down. Whether we're talking about the business's view, or the developer's view, or the tester's view. Limit it. Bring it down. Other places, debugging code for endless hours only to find a simple problem. So I started my career as a developer, and I can think of many nights where I'd be sitting there spending hours and hours and hours trying to find a problem. Only in the end to go, how on earth could I miss that? Right? It's because we're looking at things in this really big macro way. Missing a warning, I could have prevented a meltdown. So in a former life of mine, and it was in an organization that had mainframes, I walked into a smaller server room, one of many that were in the building. I walked into a server room, and right away I was hit with the aroma of electrical fire. Right? Very distinct smell that just, it's wretched. And very quickly I figured out it was one of the disk drives that was sitting there that was frying itself on the inside. So I shut it down. Afterwards, when we took a look at what was happening, there was actually a warning light that was going on all day long. Some kind of warning light. And everybody missed it. Could it be inattentional blindness? Sure. To me, it says the warning light couldn't have been that effective because people weren't expecting to see it. High defect count production. This could be a case of people are missing what's right in front of them. They're not expecting to see things. Looking at large, complex systems. Go back to the Volvo picture. We get people looking at this, it's too easy to miss things. Not seeing performance issues in people. So in my past experience, the one place I was working at, management was so focused on everybody just being happy and being a valued contributor that they actually saw everybody as good people. Now, I believe everybody's basically good and wants to do a good job, but it blinded them. They could not see the true performance issues that were going on. So these are some of the things that I've come up with where I believe we in IT, or business, or management have missed some things because we're not expecting to see them. Any other thoughts? Strategies. Well, some of them, I think, are right in front of us. And it goes back to some of what Joanna was talking about this morning. Some of them do. Right? But it's some of the agile approaches, test-driven development. One of the things I found recently, when I looked at the number of defects getting out of production and we did the triage and tried to figure out what was going on, one of the things I found out is developers were doing things, despite all of our best intention, we're doing things that the testers weren't expecting to see. Expecting them to go into that piece of code. I actually had somebody say to me, well, I didn't know they were going to go there. Nobody told me. I didn't expect that. Okay. Right? So lots of things where people are not aligned with each other. I think another strategy is peer work. You know, we often talk about pair programming. The one thing I'm introducing right now is pairing almost every skill set, including project management. Doesn't mean we got to work day to day sitting together, but I want them to interact, because I get so blinded by what my team is telling me and the direction we're heading and my preconceived notions. I don't believe we're seeing everything. Right? So pairing beyond just a programming. Time box, single person debugging. So something I introduced probably about 2 years ago now is I had a developer tell me, yeah, well, I spent 3 hours trying to debug that piece of code. I did find it, but it was about this big in the end. So we immediately instituted something that everybody bought into, which was the developer only has the autonomy to sit there for 10 minutes debugging on their own. After that, try to get up and go find someone else to sit with them and work with them. Create a culture of accepting of change and help. I think people's pride can get in the way a lot when it comes to unintentional blindness. Checking your egos at the door. Right? Think of what Joanna was talking about with specialists and generalists, right? And pairing those up. I have too many specialists, and we have a lot of them. I have too many specialists who believe they know it all. So they get their preconceived notions in the way, and they're not seeing all of these things around it. It was beautiful how Joanna described it this morning. The generalists are really good at mixing it up, seeing the unexpected. Helping our staff look for the unexpected. So when I'm driving down the road now, and I get to the corner, what I'll now do is I'll actually look around for the unexpected at a busy corner. Mentally, I'll go through this, and I hope eventually I'll stop hearing voices in my head. But I'll actually go through, you know, you're looking for cars, but I'll say motorcycles and bikes, right? So you're looking for those things. The last one is keeping the creativity alive and well. I think when we get stuck in a rut, it's all too easy to miss things, right? I didn't expect that over there to happen. Right? Those kinds of things. Any other thoughts before I move on? Okay, this is not for your benefit. This is for anybody else who might join us while I'm talking here. So I want to do a little exercise here. And it's really quite a simple exercise. The exercise is, I'm going to put something on the piece of paper here, and I want you to tell me what you see. What I don't want you to do is collaborate with anybody around you. Work individually. When you think you know what you see, just shout it out, okay, as we go through this. Any questions? Really quite a simple exercise. What do you see? One. Good. What do you see? Two. Actually, back when I saw this exercise done and I saw that, I saw it stick. So you guys must be smart. Okay. So you see two. Somebody said something different, didn't you? A road. Yes. 11. It's a 2. What do you see? 3? Just shout it out when you think you know what you see here. Okay, so that's really good. What do you see? 2? No, it's a 1. What do you see?
1.
Just shout it out.
1.
I heard some 1s. 2? It's a 2. It's a 3. Yeah. How's it yelled out?
Yeah.
What do you see?
3.
1.
3. Yeah, that was a 3. What do you see?
1.
2.
1. How many people saw 1? How many people saw a 2? How many people saw 3? Okay, let's try a couple more. What do you see?
1.
That was a 1. What do you see?
2.
How many people are struggling to see what's here and are wondering what it is I'm doing? It's okay to admit it, because when I was a part of this, I never saw it. What do you see?
1.
For those who aren't seeing it, what do you see? 1. Try one more, just to make sure everybody has the opportunity. What do you see?
2.
2, right? It's the fingers. So in this exercise, the whole point of this exercise is I'm talking about change. Things are changing in the environment. This is a very simple example up here. Things are changing in the example here. And in our minds, we have a preconceived notion about what it is we should be looking at, what it is we should be expressing. Right? So because I drew on paper, that's what we expected to talk about. The fact that the number of fingers being put up there was changing was the unexpected. Now, I had to decide how long I was going to let this exercise run. I saw Alan Shalloway do this one, and he had us going for like 15 minutes or 20 minutes or something like that, and it was painful, right? I only had 20 minutes. I didn't want to take up that much time. But I think this is very important, because what it's talking about is our mind's ability to perceive change, to see the change. And our preconceived notions get in the way of that, right? The preconceived notion that it's what's Mike is writing, that is the important thing. There's also a situation here if we see what we want to see. So this is about a 2-minute video, and this one I do wish the sound was there, but I'll explain what's happening as we go through this. But it's another scientific study by, I'm going to get the name wrong, Michael Brown, I believe it is. Anyway, regardless, it's another scientific study, and what you're going to see is he's going to approach somebody asking for directions. Partway through the video, or partway through the discussion, you're going to see how they do a quick change of who's standing or talking to the person. So I'll explain as we go through what's going on. And the only thing you're missing in sound here is talking about running an experiment to it one day. When the first person approaches here, this is the actual scientist. He's asking him for directions to a church at this point. He's pointing to the church, not the camera, truly. He's saying it's over there and that kind of thing. Now watch what happens here. They actually switch people, and the new guy just carries on with the conversation. And if you watch this guy, he's got no clue. Okay, so now he's talking about how can we push this further. Right, so he goes through this. I want to let this play because a couple of his experiments get really interesting with the switch that happens. Okay, so it's the same guy, and they carry on. And there's lots of examples of this if you go onto YouTube. You can find lots of examples. Now this is where he starts pushing it further, I believe. Let's see where we can take it. Now if you watch the lady in the left here, she's not as connected. So here, you got somebody that doesn't even look like him. Still male, but doesn't even look like him. And they just carry on. There's a few more here. Oh, this guy's great. I wish you could hear this guy that he's open, very so on and so forth. But if you watch as he's talking, he actually realizes something's not right. Right there. He actually says it. I thought you were a different guy. But then he carries on. He can't figure out what the change is. Here's two more coming up here. This one here is really good. This is where he starts pushing the envelope even more. If I'm not mistaken, this is a female. Yes. Switches male to female. And again, his target doesn't even know that just happened. Didn't even clue that that happened. Now this video goes on for about 5 minutes. It's really kind of cool. If you go to YouTube and you look for change blindness, you'll find this video. It's in amongst a number of them. But it goes on with quite a few more, and it's bizarre. I actually do recommend you go. It's hilarious to hear what these people are saying. And they don't even pick up on the change happening. So is this for real? Right? Here's a couple of examples. I don't know how well you can see that picture or if you recognize it, but it's out of the original Star Wars. And it's at the point where Obi-Wan and Luke are looking for a ride off this planet, this dusty planet. And in here, they had actually been over here talking, they came over debating, we have to do this, we don't have to do this, and so on. And here you can see there's a shadow, and you can't see it on my slide here. There's three little guys sitting in capes in the shadow. They come over here away from that, they talk, and then they go back. The shadow's gone. Right? Apparently there's 275 mistakes in the Star Wars movie. So aside from who has that kind of time to look for these mistakes, it's actually fascinating. The movie producers have to make a judgment call as to whether we as the audience will notice the change happen. There's another one, it's just hilarious. It's when they're on one of the battle stars, they're walking, the stormtroopers are walking into a room, and the stormtrooper catches the door right here. And actually it knocks them backwards. I had to go pull out the video and watch it. Yeah, sure enough, it's there. Right, when you know it's there. How could we miss these things? This isn't my wife, but she wouldn't let me use her picture, I asked. But years and years ago, she used to have really, really long hair, like down to her hips kind of thing. And she came into the house one day, and all of a sudden her hair was about this long, a little below shoulder height. I missed it. Not a good thing. I knew something was different. I couldn't peg what it was. Because she hadn't warned me that she was going to do this. Needless to say, I got a little bit of trouble. Glasses. You know, you ever had a situation where you look at somebody one morning and you go, something's different? Right? And all it is they've got different glasses or they've gone to contacts, whatever the case may be. We're blind to what's going on. And finally, more of one that you could argue is an IT one. In a past life, and I'll leave names out of this, in a past life I worked for a company that did flight planning. We had flight planning software, and for the big airlines. And there was actually an incident where a plane was coming in from overseas, heading for Toronto. And they used something called a refile, or at least they used to. The planes are far more efficient now. But they used something called a refile, which was basically to say, I'm starting in France, Paris. I want to go to Toronto. If all the ducks line up and the winds are what we think they are and so on and so forth, I should be able to make it non-stop. However, what I'm really going to file, because I legally can do so, is to stop in Montreal. And they're going to stop and refuel. When they get close to Montreal, they actually call dispatch and say, hey, can you do a refile? And what they do is run a flight plan from where they are at 40,000 feet to Toronto. And if they have enough fuel, they carry on. Okay, so all that explanation to say, when the dispatcher radioed back to the captain and said, yep, you should be able to make it if you have this fuel. And he gave him two numbers. The first one was, how much fuel is he going to burn to get from where he is to Toronto? The second number, let's see if I get this right off the top of my head. The second number he gave him was the the fuel load he should have. right? Because you don't just burn, you have to, what if you get a hold? What if I have to divert from Toronto, right? There's a lot of things, variables in there for the pilots that they have to have extra fuel. Unfortunately, what happened was we had recently changed the flight plan and reversed numbers on a page. Customers were like, yeah, well, we educate our dispatchers. This dispatcher had been on vacation. His preconceived notion was these numbers were this way around. He didn't even read the headings, would be my guess. So he read the numbers to the captain. The captain missed the fact the numbers were actually inverse to what they should be and carried on to Toronto. When they got towards Toronto, the air traffic control says, yeah, you're gonna have to hold for about 20 minutes, we're busy. And the captain went, no, we're coming straight in. We're declaring an emergency. He landed on fumes. He barely had enough gas to get there. All of it goes back to the dispatcher and the captain's inability to know something changing. So let's take it into IT. Lots of things. And I think as you think about IT in our world, I think you can understand more and more examples of where we can be blinded by change that's going on. Right? Changes to user interfaces. That's exactly what I was just talking about with the airline example. We miss the fact those fields got reversed. In that case, it could have cost lives. In other cases, it could cost money. Whatever the case may be. Ineffective flags on screens. I had a developer once come to me and say, hey Mike, you know that flag you wanted? I put it there. I said, great, show me. This is quite a while ago. And he showed me and I couldn't find it. And it came down to a little tiny asterisk off in the corner. Right? It's an ineffective flag to say, hey, look over here, something's not right. Change to a card on a project team wall. So about a year ago, we implemented camping, largely for our infrastructure folks at Home Hardware. And one of the things they struggled with was the ability to see change when they weren't present for the meeting. Change that affects them. So we had to find ways to do that. In the end, we used something, I actually got it from David Anderson, which was Card Buddies. Simply, if you're not going to be there, you have to find somebody who's going to educate you on what changed. Too much process. People not having to use what's between their ears can cause this. Home Hardware, we're very burdened, or not burdened, we have a lot of process we're trying to change, right? All of that process, though, the problem with it is it gets people on a very specific path, and they don't think for themselves beyond that. It can cause failed transformations. People have their preconceived notions, so again, going back to Joanna's keynote, people have their preconceived notions. Help them get outside of that, help them think differently, help them see the change that's going on. Any other thoughts? Strategies, working in partners and teams. If you got one person, again, this goes back to, I don't care what skill set it is. You got one person, they're going to have their preconceived notions and they're going to see what they want to see. If they have a partner, the partner could go, hey, wait a minute. Regular demos, right? As opposed to, think back to Waldo there, as opposed to creating a whole new screen with hundreds of fields or whatever happens to be on it, do it in shorter increments. Get those regular demos going. Good communication and training. The dispatcher who was on vacation, technically they should have trained him when he got back from vacation. It was missed, unfortunately. Right? But good communication and training. Collaboration right from the beginning. And what I'm talking about here is making sure you have everybody present and everybody collaborating right from the beginning. It's a way of helping to make sure people see what's going to change. Effective flags. I had to put that one in there. I actually have seen the example of the little asterisks. Right? Make sure whatever it is that's flagged is more obvious than some little nuance off to the side. Any other thoughts? Okay, going for time here. 11:45. Yes?
Checklists are some very low-tech options of basically making sure that you don't miss this. There's actually an interesting book called The Checklist Manifesto, wrote by a surgeon. And it's used successfully not in just surgery, but also, you mentioned about pilots and so on. They actually have checklists to make sure, hey, I forgot to open the landing gear or something like that.
That's a good one. You said that's the name of the book?
The book name is Checklist Manifesto.
I think the danger we got to be careful with. I do agree, checklists can help us make sure we don't miss change. That is why pilots go through so many checklists. If you think about when they turn onto the runway, what you're supposed to do is stop, right, before they take off. Now sometimes that's traffic that's causing them to stop. What they're supposed to do is their last checklist right there. That's because if something has changed in some way between the gate and there, it gives them that last opportunity to look for those critical items. Yep.
The slide before, you're talking about too many process, and can you elaborate on the strategy on how to deal with that bias?
I think what we have to do is we have to find the balance between having a checklist and the checklist constraining the thoughts and the ability of our people to think. There's no right or wrong answer in my opinion. I'm certainly not the expert in this, but I've seen examples that go in both directions, where we put a checklist in place and we think, there, that will fix the problem. By people going down through this checklist, we can't possibly miss something going wrong. The flip side of that is, by going down through a checklist, especially if it's something like knowledge work, if you're building a server, that's one thing. But if you're doing knowledge-based work, such as creating code, I never quite understood why we think computer programming is a science. To me, it's an art. And the fact you're here in an Agile conference probably says, to some degree, in some way, you're in the same camp. Software is an art, creating the software. So how do we create a checklist that's going to make sure we do all the right things when we create our code? Does that help? Did I answer the question? Yeah. Let's go on to memory. This is still within the same domain, the same science, and dealing with picture-perfect memory. Let me put a question out to you. How many people believe there is such a thing as picture-perfect memory? The ability to always recall the right thing. Cool. So a few people. Recently in science, or more and more in the sciences, we see that that's not actually the case. Memory, and this I'm actually taking away from Daniel Simon's research, memory is actually your most vivid picture of an event today. We're going to get to an example of that. The thing is, you cannot prove what is real or not based on memory alone. Recently, I've been hearing more about this, but in the criminal courts, they're actually relying on eyewitness testimony less and less, because it's actually not that reliable. I was watching something, it was on the plane on the way here, the show Criminal Minds was on. And I don't know how many people watch that, but the really smart guy on it, the tall, thin guy, this guy apparently has a picture-perfect memory. And they wanted to put him under hypnosis to recall something that happened to him when he was 4 years old. And the psychologist said, no, that's not a good idea, because what your memory is going to be transformed to is everything that happened since you were 4. And as an FBI agent, you're going to have seen a lot of things and been tainted by a lot of those things that your memory won't be the same. Now, we still proceeded and did it. But I thought, wow, that's kind of timely, given what I was going to be talking about here. So I was doing a little bit of research on memory, and there was this guy by the name of Herman, who did some research back in the 1800s about people's ability to remember. And this shocked me personally. I was like, wow, it explains a lot. Of course, my wife's still not buying into it, but it explains why I can forget so easily. The first time we look at something, this is Herman came up with this, and it's called the forgetting curve. The first time we look at something, in as quick as 20 minutes, you've lost a lot of the detail. So 20 minutes, the scale here is 5 days. 20 minutes in, you've lost a significant portion of the detail and your memory is no longer 100% reliable. A little over 2 days in, the curve starts flattening and everything beyond there is relatively flat. So it says, if we wait over 2 days to ask an eyewitness for some detail, whether it's a requirement or whatever the case may be, we've lost it. The other curves that are here are speaking to repetitiveness. It is how we can build up our memory. We show it to you once, you lose it quickly. We show it to you again, you lose it less quickly, so on and so forth. He went out 4 times in his graph here in order to get it to the point that people have fairly reliable memory. So if you saw the same event, identical event, 4 times, your memory would increase to the point where it would be fairly accurate. So is this for real? Back in the last US election, Hillary Clinton lost the election, and according to the one article I wrote, arguably for this one thing that happened. It allowed her to be painted as a crazy person that couldn't remember what went on in her life. And her story here, oops, I guess I should click on it instead. Her story here was that she had been to Bosnia on a tour. Yeah, that was helpful. Okay, I'll go back to it. She had gone to Bosnia on a tour, and they had gotten off this plane under sniper fire. They were supposed to have a nice greeting and so on and so forth. And instead, what they were met with was sniper fire, and you can see her walking off the back of this military transport. And they're showing this news video, and she's walking up to some little girl and taking flowers and so on and so forth. And this news clip's really quite fascinating because you hear her voice and she's talking about, it was awful. We had to keep her head down and run over to this armored limo and get in it, and very vividly different recollections of what was going on. Can't argue with what's in the video. What about her memory? Was she crazy? Was she making it up for some political game? Or is this a really good example of picture-perfect memory not being there? The other one was this guy. It's always good for some examples. If everybody remembers back in 9/11, kind of ironic I'm saying that, but back in 9/11, he was sitting in a schoolhouse reading to some kids. Well, apparently what happened just before that is he had walked from some other room in, read to the kids, the guy came and told him, and eventually he left. His memory, a year later, said that before he came in there, he already knew what was going on because he saw it on TV. Well, if you look at the timelines, it was on TV, or sorry, he was saying it was on TV in the room just outside of where he was reading. If you look at the timeline, it's impossible. He could not have seen the events happen before he walked into that classroom. But that's not what his memory led him to believe. So here's a little homework for you. I want you to find somebody or a group of people, and I actually did this with my wife. I want you to find somebody or a group of people that you were with and interacting with that day. Okay? And there's some questions I want you guys to work out. Where were you when you found out? How did you find out? What were your interactions? Were we all upset and running out of the building, or did we just stand there with our mouth hanging open? How did you react to the events of the day? This was a very significant event in the world. I believe it forever changed how we look at our world, right, in other societies. How can we possibly not have good memory about such a big thing? So the homework is, find someone you were with or talked to that day. Don't discuss things in advance. Be explicit with them. Tell them, don't talk to me now. I want you to write this down. I want each of you to write down your recollection, include reactions, action, words, whatever that you can remember. And then I want you to compare your notes. Don't argue, right? Because each of you will be providing what it is you remember. What I found with my wife and I were, I was at work, she was at work. I remember her calling me, she remembers emailing me. I do remember my reaction as being, oh, a plane flew into the World Trade Center. Well, he was probably off course or some kind of problem. I had just finished working at this flight planning provider a couple months before, so thought I knew it all about aviation, and stuff happens, right? And then I remembered her phoning me to say, yeah, the second one came, and no, she didn't remember it that way. It was scary how different her memories are for such a significant event. Even down to, what time did we come home that day? I remember leaving work early. She remembers me coming home after her. It was amazing how different the memories were. So, how can this impact IT? I think it can in a lot of ways. Legal proceedings was the one that jumped to my mind right away at the top. Much like the flight planning provider I used to work with, if you could be called into court for something, you better be keeping journals about whatever it is that could be used in that court proceeding. Remembering requirements differently than others. Right? We stood and we talked and we worked through things for a couple hours. How could you possibly not remember what I did? Remembering infrequent tasks. I believe this is where checklists have a very big role. If it's an event you do very infrequently and has a number of very specific tasks, it's probably good to have a checklist, because otherwise the likelihood of missing something is pretty good. All I have to do is be distracted that day for some reason, and I could miss it. Time tracking accuracy. How many organizations here track time? We do. Yeah. I'm trying to break that trend. One of the biggest problems I find with time tracking is it's more about writing fiction at week's end. Right? Go back to the chart that Herman created. Well, I'm not going to go back to it, sorry. That Herman created there. 20 minutes after I did something, I'm going to forget. So if people aren't tracking their time minute by minute, it's gone.
You forgot the slide it was on, didn't you?
What's that?
You forgot the slide it was on.
Yeah. Yeah. Touché. Meeting minutes and their accuracy. You know, capturing information. One of the things I always pride myself is coming out with good meeting minutes. In the last year, I've changed how I approach those. Because I used to think what was really good, well, you know, was either remembering up here and taking a few good notes, and a day or two later, well, I'd get to it and I'd actually produce my minutes. The likelihood of me remembering all the detail, as you could see in the chart there, diminishes quite quickly. So what I've done now is we actually share this responsibility, but it's done by laptop right there. And the important thing is not to get it all beautiful and grammatically correct. It's just to capture some good key points. Keep it small, keep it brief, right? But the longer we wait, the more likely we're to forget things. Any other thoughts before I leave this one?
So, have you tried using mind mapping for meeting minutes?
I'm a huge believer in mind mapping. I actually have used it like visually up on a whiteboard, and I've even used the tool FreeMind on here.
Oh, yeah?
The problem I find with it is not everybody thinks in terms of pictures like that. So I'm actually trying to teach that. It's a good tool. Have you used it as well?
Yes, and for taking meeting notes and things like that. And I remember doing this, and the people looking at me saying, "What the hell is that?"
Yes.
That's a mind map. So
Yes.
I bet you can't recall everything he said. It's 20 minutes in. So I walked through every single thing that we talked about, the relationships to each other. It was all there in the mind map. It works really well. It worked quite well.
Yeah, if you haven't looked at mind mapping, again, just Google it. You'll find lots of information. It can be a very effective tool for capturing notes. Whether it's notes about, you know, what some presenter is doing, or it's notes in a meeting, or whatever the case. I use it a lot to organize myself. Strategies, so journaling, user stories, right? So instead of just talking about requirements, make sure you're capturing them in something like a user story. Collaboration, checklists on critical activities. So our guys who do server builds day after day after day, it would be too easy for them to get into a rut. So we do use a checklist for them. Scripting, mundane tasks. I'm talking about automation type of scripting. Right? If it's mundane, if I really don't care about it, okay, I'll do it. You're more likely to forget something. Right? So script things. Shorten the amount of time between agreement and delivery of code. That's what Agile speaks to. Other thoughts, ideas? Okay, last section here. This starts to come back to our jelly beans here. What I'd like you to do is break into groups of about, I'm going to let you self-organize on this. Break into groups of about 6 or 7. And what I'd like you to do in your group is, first of all, once you're in their group, is appoint an observer. And I need that observer to come up to me before we get started here. So why don't you start by doing that, and I'll explain what the activity is once we have that. Maybe by row or groups of rows. 6 or 7 is just a guideline.
5, 6.
So if the observer can come up here.
I'll come and join you. All right.
Observers.
We need the number of observers for this group. Anybody can.
And then once you've read this, observers, just go sit with your group again.
I didn't notice the...
Any others? That's it. Just got to give the observers a moment to read. No, you're going to end up going back, but read that. Oh, you can keep it.
Imagine that's just by running up to 10. But you're in that's the world.
Who came up with the first number? What's it? So the second person. Okay? Interesting. Group 7, yes.
So Chad was the first person to speak, and his initial answer was 100. And then he was more against the random guess. And we kind of took the more mathematical approach after, and our final guess was 230.
Okay, if I missed it in groups. Yep.
The first person who spoke, and he said 110. The second person said 370. And we end up with the mean, average mean, which is 256.
Excellent. Any other groups? Did I miss anybody?
Yourself?
Myself? No, see, I counted them out, so I know how many. Okay, so.
We need to know how many.
What's that?
How many?
There are actually 356. 356 is the chart.
Somebody was born out.
So this has actually been a really cool exercise. Now, the person who was closest, and I'll apologize if I pronounce this incorrectly, Jasek?
Yeah, that's me.
Perfect. So it's yours if you'd like it. He had actually guessed 351 at the beginning there. So the thing I'm working to here, I'm working on a number of concepts. Somebody's signing the jar. Basic, do you have kids at home or something? Yeah. So they're going to love you. They want you to go to more conferences instead of this. I'm working on a number of concepts here. And one of them is the wisdom of a crowd. Okay? So together, we all put guesses into the bag there. This is the first time I've run, or sorry, this is the second time I've run this experiment. The first time it was actually closer. But the best way to find out how many jelly beans are in a jar like that is to actually look at the average, wisdom of a crowd. And so the average we came up with was 348, so pretty close. First time somebody experimented with this, they had farmers guessing the weight of a steer. And each one of them was, you know, either close or not close, but their averages was pretty much right on. So given, you know, there could be 100 or there could be 1,000 in there, I think we're actually really close. So there's a lot to be said for the wisdom of a crowd. So when you're talking about your team, put them all on the same level as we were here, and look for, what does the crowd say? A couple more slides here, and then we're almost at lunchtime. So what Daniel Simons calls this in his book is the illusion of confidence. Now, this isn't Daniel's slide, but I was trying to figure out how can I pictorially represent this for discussion. So we equate confidence with competence. So in this exercise we just ran here, think about the first person who came out with a number and how closely that aligned with your group's final answer. I see a lot of variance in that. First time I ran this exercise, so it was kind of interesting to see what happened there. But oftentimes, the first person to speak is the one whose will is imposed. It's a problem we have with consensus-based decision-making. And the first person to speak is usually somebody like myself, right? Because I am outgoing, I'm an extrovert, and I'll get in there and, okay, here it is. Because I'm coming across with confidence, people go, that's not what he's talking about. But it's something we have to deal with in business and in IT. So high confidence, right, my ability to come out quickly can often be equated to, sorry, let me go the other way first, low confidence and high confidence. So if I'm highly confident, there's a good chance I might be low in terms of confidence. Doesn't mean I'm stupid, doesn't mean they should fire me, it just doesn't necessarily mean I know what I'm talking about. Somebody with realistic confidence, and that could be high or low, but the most realistic confidence tend to be the people who are highly competent. I'll be the first person in a meeting now, since I've learned about this, I'll be the first person to go, I don't know anything about this subject. Because I just level set, because I know my confidence could override where the competence truly lays in the team. So I'll be the first person to say, I don't know. So, is this for real? How many people had to travel by airline to get here? And I assume all of us at some point in our lives have been at the airport getting on an airplane, and we see those screens that are up there saying when they're arriving in a hurry. Okay, so here's a little secret if you didn't know this already. That is all about the illusion of confidence. How many times have you really left exactly when that screen said? Some. Airlines have tolerances to work with, and they will actually sit in dispatch going, okay, is this late enough for us to now declare this late? Right? Put it up on the screen as late, because that, when you see the late, think about your emotional state. When you look at that screen and you see late or delayed, right? It brings you down. By working with those tolerances and giving the illusion that they actually know exactly when something's going to happen, it keeps us as passengers feeling better. Let's move to the cockpit. How would you feel if your captain came out and said, hey, how's it going, folks? You know, we're at 40,000 feet. And I'm pretty sure it's going to be a smooth flight all the way to their destination, and you know, it should be more or less clear when we're going to land, and with any luck, we'll hit the runway. Right? What would that do to your mental state? I don't know about you, but I'd be like, white knuckle, and I'm not a white knuckle flyer. They teach pilots how to talk to keep us relaxed in the back there, and give us the illusion that they actually do know what they're doing. Now, this doesn't happen so much as it used to, but back in the day before GPS and before all these fancy flight computers, they would fly by radio signal. And it was actually quite common for them to descend through the clouds thinking there'd be a runway right there, and it's over there. And so they go around. That's why they had minimum visibility clearances. Doctors, you know, think about the number of interactions with your doctors and how good they are. The good bedside manner ones will always make you feel good. And it's by not saying things like, let me think, I think I read about this somewhere. I'll be right back. I'm going to go look this up and then come back and say, well, I think I found something on this, right? My family doctor, he's one of the true gems that's left, and unfortunately he's retiring next year. But one of our sons, back when he was 4 months old, was having seizures. I earned his undying respect, or he earned my respect, because he said when my son was having seizures, he says, I don't know, let's get you to somebody who will. He didn't mess around. He kept the confidence level high. Let's put you where you're going to get what you need. And then finally, my golf game. And no, I don't wear pants like that or a visor like that. Right? But talk about my golf game. When I golf with people, they often think, wow, Mike's having a bad day today. No, I'm not a good golfer. Right? But I give the illusion of confidence. I don't have an expensive set of clubs. I don't lie, I don't pretend. I just go out. And the only book I've ever read about golfing is Golfing for Dummies. But it's all about how you present yourself. Okay? It's the illusion of confidence. In IT, I think we see this in a lot of different places. Consensus-based decision-making is a huge problem. Autocratic cultures. Because it's autocratic, the guy up above me must know what he's talking about. And so therefore, he must know, or he's giving me the illusion of confidence. A hero culture, right? Wow, this guy saved us, 12 times. He must know what he's doing. That's the way we've always done it. We have a real problem with that at times. That's the way we've always done it. It gives the confidence that that's the right thing. Silo organizations, right? A very silo-based organization. People within the silo can give the confidence that they know what's going on within that silo. It's not always the case, right? And they protect that knowledge, the fact that that may not be the case. Strategies, vote-based decision-making. This is one I picked up. Anybody know who Jim McCarthy is? I highly recommend looking him up. And I got some references on the last slide. But I highly recommend looking up his resources that are out on the web. I believe it's the McCarthyShow.com. But they have a solution for this, and that is, in a team, and I've used this, and it really does work effectively. In a team, when we need to make a decision, we're not going to stand there and debate it. The very first thing we're going to do is vote on it. So we stand around on the team. Here's the decision we need to make. And then everybody has 3 choices to make. I fully support it, I fully don't support it, or you know what, I'm kind of indifferent, but I'm not going to stand in your way. If we support it, that's cool. If there's a couple of these, that's cool. If you come out with one of these, you must immediately also come out with an alternative. And if you come out with the alternative, or when you come out with the alternative, you know what, we're going to vote on that. Right? We're going to work our way through finding the best decision. So what we do is we avoid the debate. The debate comes later, which isn't so much debate as it is working out the details. Now decisions are made a lot quicker. Highly recommend looking up Jim. It's a really good one. Agile approaches, I believe, are another thing that help us deal with it. Pair programming, collaborative planning, Kanban boards, whatever the case may be. I think there's a number of things that help us deal with this.
About the illusion of confidence and Agile. In Agile, you have a product owner, and you have the people that these product owners go to, we call them SMEs, subject matter experts. So you go in a meeting, and the product owner know how much money there is. Now the SMEs want to do the best for their area. They represent 5, 6 areas. Suddenly, a $200,000 project to do 1/4 of what they want is like a multi-million. There's exaggeration there. So, and a person say, we're going to show these measures. The other person say, no, it has to be these measures. You cannot put that into a book. You have to give it to the person who knows the area.
That's a really tough one, because you do assign the product owner the illusion of confidence, right? Inside the team, we're saying, you're the one who needs to know these things. So if you have somebody who has a really strong personality, who's your product owner, oftentimes they can give the illusion that, yeah, you know what, they actually do know what the right answer is here. I think what you have to do is find ways to go beyond that, right? Look at the team. There is a lot of wisdom in the crowd that's around there. Odds are you're going to have some people that range on your team, range from being relatively new to being very experienced, right? Look to capitalize on some of the wisdom. Yes, the product owner has a role, but maybe you can use some vote-based decision-making when you're going through looking at what's the most important thing in a backlog. Find ways to draw that information out. Maybe go beyond the product owner. We actually brought in, when we were doing our iteration planning, we would actually bring in a couple of the users. And that would create an environment where the product owner could not override them through confidence. And we had this one example of a project we were doing. It wasn't anything remarkable. It was just some enhancements. We had 2 screens in scope. And we were working ahead, and the developer did a prototype of both screens, just a really quick mock-up. And it was somebody on the team turned to one of the users and said, so how would you use this? And the user went, well, actually, we'll never touch that screen. Screen's out of scope, right? Our product owner gave us the confidence that we had to build both of them. We had to find ways to draw more information. Doesn't always work, right? You could still hit the wrong thing. Okay? But find ways to draw those things out. One more question, because we're almost out of time here.
Just changing kind of topic slightly. You can also have an illusion of doom in a project. Everything is late.
Sometimes that's not an illusion.
No, everything is late. Everything is full of bugs. You don't meet your features. Blah blah blah. You know, you're going on forever. When in fact things may not be quite as bad. And sometimes you have to turn things around and say, yes, we are doing actually good work here, even though we're not 100% meeting time.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree. And you know, whether it's doom or it's, you know, whatever it is, maybe you're even having the illusion of, you know, how would you put it, perfection, like, you know, it couldn't do it any better. You know, whatever those solutions are, look to break them down. I've hit on 4 of them here today. There's much more out there. Daniel Simon's book, The Invisible Drill, is a really good read. Really talks a lot about human nature. It's changed not how only I think about things inside of work, but outside of work as well. So we are out of time here. I want to thank you very much. You've been a great audience. I love to jelly and debate. That was really cool. I hope you got value out of this. Please don't forget to put a chip into the appropriate bin there. If it's red, that's cool. Now I know. Okay? But please, let me know what you're thinking. Thank you very much.